Have you ever planted a beautiful, healthy cucumber seedling only to watch it collapse and die just one day after you gave it its very first feeding? It is a heartbreaking moment for any gardener. Today we are talking about the ultimate cucumber growing mistake. It is an error so common, yet so destructive, that it completely burns away the delicate root system of your plants in exactly 24 hours. I am going to show you exactly what causes this disaster, why your good intentions are actually turning your soil into a toxic environment, and the surprising truth about what your young plants really need. But first, let me ask you a controversial question. Do you feed your seedlings the very same day you put them in the ground? If you said yes, you might want to brace yourself, because you are playing a very dangerous game with your harvest. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you will know the exact secret to safely feeding your cucumbers for massive yields, without risking a sudden garden tragedy. To truly understand why this rapid root destruction happens, we need to look back at where our modern gardening habits actually come from. For decades, commercial agriculture has heavily promoted the idea that more fertilizer equals faster growth and bigger profits. This industrial mindset slowly trickled down into everyday backyard gardening. We are constantly bombarded with advertisements for miracle plant foods that promise explosive growth overnight. Because of this, a very dangerous gardening culture has developed. We have been conditioned to believe that a plant is starving the moment it is placed in the soil. We think we are being good plant parents by immediately serving up a heavy buffet of chemical or raw organic nutrients. However, we completely forget that a backyard garden bed is a delicate biological ecosystem, not a sterile hydroponic factory. Cucumbers, historically originating from the warm, humid forests of South Asia, evolved to slowly forage for nutrients in rich, decaying leaf litter. They did not evolve to withstand a sudden, concentrated flood of synthetic salts or raw, hot manure directly against their baby roots. Understanding this natural history is the key to breaking the cycle of killing our plants with too much love. Let us dive straight into the hidden world underground to understand why this happens. Imagine the root system of a baby cucumber plant. Unlike a tough tomato root or a deeply anchored weed, a young cucumber root is incredibly fragile. It is covered in microscopic, delicate root hairs that are no thicker than a single strand of spider silk. These tiny hairs are the main engines for taking up water and nutrients from the soil. When you apply a harsh, concentrated fertilizer too early, you are basically dropping a chemical bomb on these microscopic lifelines. The roots do not have a protective bark or a thick outer layer yet. They are fully exposed to whatever you pour into that dirt. So instead of gently absorbing the food, these sensitive hairs go into a state of shock. They physically shrivel up because the salt content in the fertilizer pulls the moisture right out of them. It is exactly like pouring table salt on a garden slug. The moisture is drawn out, the cells collapse, and the root system dies. Without these microscopic hairs, the plant cannot drink, even if the soil is completely soaking wet. Now, let us talk about the specific scientific process that ruins your plants, known as reverse osmosis. This is a crucial concept to grasp if you want to avoid burning your roots. Under normal circumstances, the fluid inside the cucumber root has a higher concentration of minerals than the surrounding soil water. This natural imbalance allows water to easily flow from the wet soil directly into the root. But what happens when you mix up a strong batch of liquid fertilizer for that first feeding? You completely reverse this natural balance. Suddenly, the soil water is heavily packed with fertilizer salts, making it much denser than the fluid inside the plant. Because of the laws of physics, water always moves toward the higher concentration of salts. So the moisture gets sucked right out of the cucumber roots and pulled back into the soil. Your plant is literally bleeding out its own water to dilute the strong fertilizer you just applied. This is why a plant can die of dehydration while sitting in a puddle of muddy water. It is a terrifying paradox for any gardener. One of the biggest traps gardeners fall into is the myth that early nitrogen is always a good thing. We have all heard the advice that nitrogen makes plants grow green and leafy. Because cucumbers are vines that need to produce a lot of foliage, it seems completely logical to pump them full of nitrogen right from the start. But here is the dangerous truth we need to uncover. A young cucumber seedling does not need to build massive leaves right away. Its primary goal is to establish a strong, wide root system to support future growth. When you hit a baby plant with a heavy dose of high nitrogen fertilizer, you force it to rapidly push out green top growth. This sounds great until you realize the root system is too small to support those big, new leaves. The plant becomes totally out of balance. Even worse, synthetic nitrogen sources are highly volatile and extremely salty. When applied to delicate early roots, they cause immediate chemical burns. The roots literally turn brown and mushy within 24 hours, leaving the plant unable to sustain that forced green growth. Let us look at a very specific and highly destructive scenario: the fatal mistake of feeding your cucumbers when the soil is dry. This is perhaps the fastest way to guarantee a one-day root burn. Imagine eating a massive, incredibly salty meal when you are already severely dehydrated and have nothing to drink. That is exactly what your plants experience when you apply fertilizer to dry soil. When the potting mix or garden dirt lacks moisture, any fertilizer you add, whether liquid or granular, remains highly concentrated in small pockets around the roots. There is no water to dilute it or spread it evenly through the surrounding earth. The microscopic root hairs, desperate for any moisture, reach out and absorb this pure, undiluted chemical salt. The burning effect is instantaneous and catastrophic. Always remember this unbreakable golden rule of gardening. You must thoroughly water your plants with plain, clean water at least 2 hours before you even think about applying any type of liquid feed. This pre-watering creates a protective buffer zone and allows the soil to distribute the nutrients safely. Temperature plays a massive, often ignored role in how quickly your cucumber roots can burn. Let us explore how hot weather turns a mild mistake into a total disaster. When the sun is beating down and the soil temperature rises, the chemical reactions in the dirt speed up dramatically. If you apply a first feeding during the heat of the day or during a sudden heat wave, the water in your fertilizer solution evaporates very quickly. What is left behind? A crust of highly concentrated, blazing hot fertilizer salts resting right against the delicate stem and shallow roots of your cucumber plant. Furthermore, in hot weather, the plant is already stressed and trying to cool itself down through a process called transpiration. Its pores are wide open, pulling water rapidly up from the soil. If that water is tainted with heavy fertilizer, the plant sucks up a lethal dose of salts in record time. This is why a feeding that might be perfectly safe on a cool, cloudy morning can completely scorch and kill your entire crop in a matter of hours on a hot, sunny afternoon. We need to clear up a very dangerous myth about organic gardening right now. Many people believe that if a fertilizer is natural or organic, it is impossible to burn the plants. This could not be further from the truth, especially when it comes to raw animal manures. Chicken manure, for example, is incredibly popular because it is rich in nutrients. But fresh or improperly composted chicken manure is notoriously hot. It contains massive amounts of raw ammonia and uric acid. When you place this near the roots of a young cucumber, the ammonia gas actually suffocates the roots, while the uric acid physically burns the cellular tissue. It is a highly aggressive chemical reaction, completely natural, but totally deadly. Even cow or horse manure can be dangerous if it has not been aged for at least 6 to 12 months. As these organic materials break down, they heat up significantly. If this composting process happens right next to your seedling in the garden bed, it will literally cook the roots alive within a single day. Natural does not always mean gentle. Another common organic mistake involves the heavy use of wood ash for the very first feeding. Wood ash is an excellent source of potassium and calcium, which cucumbers do eventually need. However, wood ash is extremely alkaline. When you mix a large handful of wood ash directly into the planting hole or water it in right after planting, you cause a sudden, violent spike in the soil acidity levels. Cucumbers prefer a slightly acidic to neutral soil environment. By dumping high pH wood ash around their baby roots, you create an alkaline trap. In this highly alkaline environment, the plant completely loses its ability to absorb essential micronutrients like iron and manganese. The roots become stunted, locked out of their food supply, and physically damaged by the sudden chemical shift. It is like trying to breathe in a room filled with thick smoke. The plant suffocates on a chemical level. Wood ash should only be used very sparingly, well mixed into the soil weeks before planting. Never as an immediate shock treatment for a fragile new seedling. So, what does this root burn actually look like above ground? Let us paint a picture of the visual symptoms so you can spot the disaster as it happens. The very first sign of root burn is a sudden dramatic wilting of the entire plant. You walk out to your garden one morning, and the cucumber leaves look like limp, lifeless rags hanging over the edges of the pot. Naturally, your first instinct is to panic and assume the plant needs water. But here is the critical clue. You stick your finger into the soil, and it is completely wet. This is the hallmark sign of reverse osmosis and fertilizer burn. The soil has plenty of water, but the ruined, burned roots are physically incapable of drinking it. If you make the mistake of adding more water right now, hoping to revive the wilted leaves, you will only accelerate the rotting process of the already dead root system. Recognizing this specific combination of severely wilted leaves on top of soaking wet soil is crucial for diagnosing the mistake before you make it worse. As the hours pass, the symptoms of the one-day root burn progress into the foliage itself. If the plant survives the initial shock of dehydration, you will begin to see very distinct color changes. Take a close look at the edges of the cucumber leaves. When the roots are burned by excess salts, the plant tries to push those toxic salts as far away from its vital center as possible. It pushes them right to the very margins and tips of the oldest leaves. You will see a crispy, bright yellow or brown rim form around the outside edge of the leaf. This is not a disease, and it is not a bug bite. This is a classic chemical burn showing up on the foliage. Slowly, this crispy, dead tissue will spread inward between the veins of the leaf. The center of the leaf might stay somewhat green, but the edges will look like they were held over a lighter. By the time you see this severe yellowing and browning on the edges, the damage underground is extensive, and the plant is fighting for its life. Let us break down the exact 24-hour timeline of this disaster, so you know how fast it really happens. Hour 1. You mix up a strong dose of liquid synthetic fertilizer and pour it over the young seedling. Hour 2. The heavy salt concentration hits the microscopic root hairs. Reverse osmosis begins instantly, sucking the clean water out of the plant and into the salty soil. Hour 6. The root hairs begin to shrivel and collapse. The plant loses its ability to pull moisture upward. Hour 12. The sun comes up, and the plant tries to transpire to stay cool, but there is no water pressure coming from the dead roots. The leaves begin to droop heavily. Hour 18. The cellular tissue in the main taproot begins to turn brown and necrotic due to the chemical burns from the nitrogen or raw ammonia. Hour 24. The plant is completely flat on the ground. The edges of the lower leaves are already turning crispy and yellow. The root system is now 50 to 80% destroyed. The mistake is fully realized. Is there any hope if you realize you just made this terrible mistake? Yes, but you must act immediately. If you poured a heavy fertilizer on your young cucumbers and suddenly remember this video, you need to perform an emergency soil flush. Do not wait for the leaves to wilt. Grab a hose and start flooding the area with fresh, clean water. Your goal is to physically wash the concentrated salts down deep into the soil, far away from the fragile upper root zone. You want to apply at least 3 to 4 times the volume of water as there is soil in the immediate root area. If the plant is in a container, run water through it continuously until gallons of clear water drain out the bottom. This feels counterintuitive because you are heavily soaking the plant, but it is the only way to dilute the chemical bomb you just dropped. This emergency flush might cause a temporary nutrient deficiency later, but it is the only way to stop the roots from literally burning off within the next 24 hours. One of the most profound mistakes happens right at the moment of transplanting. Many gardeners believe that moving a plant from a small pot into the garden bed is incredibly stressful, so they want to comfort the plant with a big meal of fertilizer in the planting hole. This is completely backward logic. When you transplant a seedling, you inevitably break and tear tiny, microscopic root hairs. The root system has open, raw wounds. If you immediately apply a strong fertilizer, those harsh salts enter directly into the open wounds of the plant. It is exactly like rubbing salt into a cut on your finger. The pain and damage are magnified tenfold. A newly transplanted cucumber needs time to heal its damaged tissue and send out new exploratory roots into its new environment. It does not need a heavy, salty meal. The absolute best thing you can do for a transplant is water it deeply with plain water and simply leave it alone to recover in peace for at least several days. So, when is the actual correct time to perform the very first feeding? You have to learn to read the plant, not the calendar. Do not feed immediately after planting. Instead, watch the development of the true leaves. The very first 2 leaves that a cucumber seed pushes out are called cotyledons. They are smooth and oval-shaped. They do not count. You must wait until the plant has grown at least 2 to 3 fully developed, true leaves with those classic jagged edges. When a plant has successfully grown 3 true leaves in its new garden bed, it is signaling to you that its root system has healed from transplant shock, has expanded into the surrounding soil, and is finally robust enough to handle a gentle influx of new nutrients. This waiting period usually takes anywhere from 7 to 14 days after you plant them in the yard. Patience is your greatest tool here. Waiting those extra days guarantees the roots are tough enough to actually benefit from the food. When that perfect time finally arrives, what should you actually feed them? This is where we pivot away from the deadly mistakes and look at the perfect first meal. Forget about heavy nitrogen. Your primary focus for the first feeding should be phosphorus and gentle root stimulators. Phosphorus is the essential mineral that tells the plant to expand its root mass. The larger and deeper the root system becomes early on, the more water and nutrients the plant can absorb later when it is trying to produce dozens of heavy cucumbers. Look for a fertilizer blend where the middle number on the package, which represents phosphorus, is higher than the first number, which is nitrogen. But remember, even with the right nutrient balance, the dose makes the poison. For the very first feeding, you should take whatever the manufacturer recommends on the bottle and cut it completely in half, or even down to 1/4 strength. A weak, highly diluted dose of phosphorus-rich food is the safest way to wake up the root system without risking any chemical burns. If you want to be incredibly safe and guarantee zero root burn, you should look into using humic acids for the first application instead of traditional NPK fertilizers. Humic acid is a natural organic compound extracted from ancient decaying plant matter. It is not exactly a food in the traditional sense. Instead, it acts like a magic key for the soil. Humic acids naturally chelate or bind to the existing nutrients that are already locked up in your garden dirt, making them instantly accessible to the baby cucumber roots. More importantly, humic acid acts as a powerful buffer against salt buildup. It protects the fragile root hairs from chemical stress and actively stimulates massive root branching. By applying a weak solution of humic acid or a specialized root stimulator product about a week after planting, you give the plant a massive advantage without introducing any dangerous burning salts into the delicate soil ecosystem. It is the ultimate gentle start for a heavy-yielding plant. There is another brilliant, completely safe workaround for the first feeding that bypasses the dangerous root zone altogether. Have you ever tried foliar feeding? Cucumbers have wide, slightly fuzzy leaves that are incredibly efficient at absorbing nutrients directly through their pores, known as stomata. If you are worried that your soil is too poor, or if your plants look a little pale a week after planting, you can mix an extremely weak, highly diluted liquid organic fertilizer, like liquid kelp or seaweed extract. Put this weak mixture into a spray bottle and gently mist the leaves early in the morning or late in the evening. The leaves will pull the trace minerals and gentle nutrients directly into the plant's vascular system. Because you are totally avoiding the soil, there is zero risk of reverse osmosis or root burn underground. Foliar feeding provides a safe, gentle, immediate energy boost that tides the seedling over until its root system is fully mature and ready for heavier soil feedings. Let us talk about the invisible army that can protect your cucumbers from your mistakes. The role of soil microbiology. A healthy living soil is filled with billions of beneficial bacteria and mycorrhizal fungi. When you use harsh synthetic chemical fertilizers for the first feed, the high salt content actually kills off these helpful microbes. However, if you focus on building a healthy soil web, these microscopic creatures act as a powerful shield. Beneficial fungi actually attach themselves to the cucumber roots, effectively extending the root system and bringing in water and food safely. More importantly, a healthy microbial population acts as a buffer. If you accidentally apply slightly too much organic food, the microbes consume it first, breaking it down slowly and feeding it to the plant at a safe, regulated pace. To encourage this, consider watering your new seedlings with a compost tea or a microbial inoculant instead of a heavy fertilizer. You are feeding the soil biology, and the biology safely feeds the young plant. One of the silliest yet most common ways people destroy their roots is simply through lazy measuring. We have all been there. You are in a rush, you grab a box of granular fertilizer, and you just toss a loose handful around the base of the plant. This eyeballing method is a guaranteed path to the one-day root burn. Granular fertilizers are highly concentrated. A single tablespoon contains a massive amount of chemical energy. When you toss a handful haphazardly, large clumps of granules inevitably fall directly against the tender stem of the cucumber seedling. As those granules slowly dissolve, they create a localized zone of extreme toxicity. It will burn a physical hole straight through the stem, a condition often confused with stem rot. You must be painfully precise. If the box says 1 teaspoon per plant, use an actual measuring spoon. Keep the fertilizer in a wide ring at least 4 to 6 inches away from the main stem. Never let concentrated food touch the physical body of a young seedling. Let us settle the debate between liquid and granular fertilizers for this crucial first stage. While granular fertilizers are great for long-term, slow-release feeding later in the season, they are incredibly risky for the first feeding of a baby seedling. As we just discussed, they are hard to distribute evenly and can cause hotspots in the soil. Liquid fertilizers, on the other hand, are generally much safer for young plants, but only if you follow the golden rule of dilution. Because liquids are already dissolved in water, they disperse evenly through the soil profile, preventing those dangerous hotspots. However, because they are immediately available to the plant, a full-strength dose will cause the reverse osmosis shock we talked about earlier. Therefore, always choose a high-quality organic liquid feed for the first meal, but dilute it to 1/4 of the recommended strength. A weak, liquid solution provides an even, gentle blanket of nutrition that the newly established root hairs can easily handle. To wrap up this deep dive, I am going to give you the ultimate, foolproof recipe for the perfect first cucumber feeding. It is virtually impossible to burn your roots with this method. Wait exactly 10 days after transplanting your seedlings into the garden. Ensure the soil is already slightly moist. In a large watering can, mix 1 gallon of pure, chlorine-free water. Add just 1 tablespoon of high-quality liquid kelp extract, which provides gentle trace minerals and rooting hormones. Then, add 1 teaspoon of liquid humic acid to buffer the soil and protect the delicate root hairs. Do not add any heavy nitrogen or strong synthetic salts. Gently water the soil around the outer drip line of the leaves, keeping the liquid away from the main stem. This magical, weak tea provides everything the young plant needs to expand its root system without triggering any chemical shock. By using this gentle approach, your cucumbers will build a massive, invisible foundation underground, preparing them to pump out hundreds of crisp cucumbers all summer long. And there you have it, the complete breakdown of why the first feeding can turn into a total disaster, and exactly how you can avoid it. We have uncovered the invisible world of microscopic root hairs, the shocking reality of reverse osmosis, and the dangerous myths surrounding heavy nitrogen and raw organic manures. The most important takeaway from all of this is patience. By waiting until your cucumbers have established true leaves, pre-watering your soil, and choosing a weak, root-focused solution over a harsh chemical blast, you protect your plants from the dreaded one-day burn. Remember, a massive harvest does not come from forcing a baby plant to eat too much too soon. It comes from gently building a strong, healthy root system that can support heavy fruiting later on. Thank you so much for watching and learning with us today. If this video saved your cucumbers from a fiery fate, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever accidentally burned your plants with too much fertilizer? And what did you use? Share your garden horror stories and successes in the comments below.